to All Areas, episode 218 for the podcast that all aims to dive deep into all things great about our favourite band, INXS, doing it with my compadre B and a bunch of listeners and patrons around the world. B, this is our first time ever. I'm doing an outside broadcast today, live from the stadium venue of my local Suns football team.
I feel like I'm talking to just the beard. It's very off-putting, but that's okay. I think we've got this.
Well, look, listeners, not that anyone cares, but in the interest of school holidays, one decided not to have a shave for a couple of weeks. And yeah, you're right, B. I'm getting a little bit grey around the chin.
Oh, well, we're getting to that age now.
That's all right. I might do a Kirk and get some peroxide in there.
Yeah, why not? Just do it.
We're getting pretty excited because our party's coming up in a couple of weeks' time and lots of things are happening. I want to do a quick shout out at the start of the call, though, B, to John Jamin, who signed us up for the Rock and Roll Hall Fame membership / ticket ballot / in the queue access, whatever it all is. John, thank you very much.
Yes, John, thank you so much. I've just come off a call from him. He's going to be bringing some goodies for us all at the party as well, which is very exciting. Yeah, he's gold, absolute gold. Yeah. Hey, do you remember a guy called Dane Peters?
Dane Peters, is that Karen's illegitimate son?
I think you've said that before. No, Dane was actually, he had a terrible accident when he was a kid and he was in hospital, and INXS went to see him.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, right. And he's messaged me today and he's coming to the party too, and that's it. We're fully booked. Fantastic.
It's all happening, and with a lot of things coming up there, you might have is there a little party hint you can drop later in the episode today? Something that our little party goers might encounter that our people who can't go could feel extremely jealous about?
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
Right, okay. Can we mention the chocolate bar later?
You want to? Are you?
Okay, stay listening to the end of the show, everybody. B's coming up with a fantastic chocolate bar. A couple of years ago, B, what was it called?
It was called the Taste It Bar.
Yeah, okay. Well, but you've definitely trumped yourself this time. So stay to the wrap today. We'll share with you one of the famous INXS chocolate bars that's going to be at this party. So I will let our listeners look forward to that. Sometimes I can't believe my pain.
Hey, do you remember Bruce as well, who was Ollie Olsen's manager?
Yes.
Yeah, I was in touch with him again today as well. He's got his own nightclub, by the way, in Melbourne, which you should go to. And he's going to be having a listening party, not only of Kick, but he's also going to have another one of Listen Like Thieves.
Wow. Well, we have to do a broadcast from there. Is that happening in the next month or so when the album's out?
It will be, I think it's towards the end of May. I'll have to check my phone. I think it was something like the 30th. But yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it?
Yes, that's great. Yeah, and look, as we probably have said, it's only a couple of weeks to go to the re-release comes out, so there's lots of things going on. I'll say for the news. But how's your INXS week been overall, B? I'm sure you've been busy coordinating the party, but anything come across your desk?
Yes, so the venue's got paid for today. We've got the cocktails named. It's all tick, tick, tick. Everything's coming together. I'm feeling pretty non-stressed about it now. It's more just like, let's find out what we're going to wear.
Well, I haven't even thought about that. But isn't there this? Was it Keith Lemon who had the Michael's pants from Wembley? Was that right?
Yeah. In fact, I don't know if you saw one of the posts that Danielle put out the other day from the X tour. There was a bomber jacket. I think the I was on the sleeve and the XS is on the body, and then the other S is on the other sleeve. Well, yes. So, Mr. Lemon got in touch and he says, I've got that. Fantastic.
All right. And what else is happening?
What else is happening? I can't think of anything else at the moment, Hayden.
Right. Well, I do know, and a big shout out to you for all the planning and work you've done. Like always, I glide along in your coattails. For all those coming overseas, we do want to sort of extend a quick thank you for those who've booked trips and flying out and being international patrons coming in. Fantastic. So we're going to have to record something with those patrons in town of some description to put on an episode. Looking forward to meeting some of those people in person for the very first time.
Yes, it's going to be wonderful. So I'll be busy in the next couple of weeks getting a video of all the footage together as well for our wall. And you and I are going to do a bit of an awards ceremony as well, aren't we?
That's true. There are going to be some very, very interesting awards given out. So think about the Grammys. meets the MTV Awards, meets the Academy Awards. We want you to be full of pomp and completely bloated and completely thank God and everybody else. And we want you to cry when you accept your award. No, we don't. We don't want that. We're going to have a great time. Now, brings me to the patrons, B. I thought I would do some big shout out here. Now, all those people out there who aren't patrons have been listening for free for a number of years and enjoying our content and enjoying sort of all the information that we share about our favourite band and having some sort of enjoyment from it. We need you to tip into your pockets and maybe the price of a cup of coffee a month, chip in and become a patron. You know, you got to be in it to win it. You know, we want to go to the Rock Hall of Fame with the biggest entourage of fans of any band are getting inducted. If you're not a patron, you can't come. And if you're getting, a lot of enjoyment out of this, as I said, we don't put ads on this podcast. In our 5 years, we've never put a single ad on our podcast. We've never sold out. We're true to INXS. We don't sell out. We do rely completely on patron support to make this sort of a worthwhile exercise. So if you have enjoyed our podcast, whether it's for a year or a month or 4 years or 5 years, and you haven't become a patron, there's bronze, silver and gold and platinum patrons packages. Come on, step up to the plate. We need you.
Yeah, where are you?
Yeah.
Calling all nations.
Calling all nations. That's my guilt trip, etc. There. It's completely free. You never have to fast forward with our podcast for an ad.
Yeah.
And if there is, that's Spotify is chucking one in. We didn't put the ad in.
We didn't put them in, no.
No.
And just to add, yes, this party is starting in Sydney, but we're thinking we might go to Prague in a couple of years. So yeah, let's get some funds together and make this party even more epic in Europe.
Right. That's right. So speaking of patrons, all of those who do tip in, let's give a massive shout out to those, B, and welcome to the episode.
I'd like to say hello to everybody outside on the highway. Let's all say hello to everybody outside. It's about 10,000 people at least. Hello.
Well, hello to our honorary members, Tim Farris, Nick Egan, Mark Opitz, Richard Simpkin, Cameron Adams, Mary Woods, Darren Jones and Paul Jolie. Our patrons, Carmen, Carrie-Anne, Danielle, Sarah Markham, Sarah Camia, Dr. Jim, Katie, Lisa Mack, Anne-Marie, Susan P, Pedro, Mandy, Amanda H, David, Paul Jolie, Amanda V, Ella, Ryder, Tony, Erica, Abigail, Stefan, Jim, John A. Vink, Jackie, Sheila, Helen, Brett, Suzanne, Glenn Davis, Laurel, Bard, Laurie, Manny, Jill, Heidi, Paula, Lisa, Michael, Juliet, Scott, Anthea, Tracy, Diana, Andrew, Georgie, Stephen, Mark, Vernon, Vern, Mandy Jane, Nick, Sula, Amy, Paul P, Paul B, Kathy, Jay, Amberette, John Jamin, Chantel, Neil, Mary Ellen, Giuliano, Darren, Amber, Mark, Rob, Minnie, John Bridges, and not forgetting Joe Robbins and Sue D. Welcome to the podcast.
All right, B, we'll topic in today. We are in Australia, as you know, this weekend, B, celebrating Anzac Day, which is our sort of ode, respect for all of our wartime diggers and all the people who've gone to battle and lost their lives. And it's an amazing day in Australia, and it's on Friday, sort of April 25th, and it's just a magnificent day. Many years ago, war veterans, particularly with Vietnam, used to come back and often get, ridiculed and shamed and things like that. But I know in Australia, for example, it's been... it's probably our most famous day of the year and our probably most celebrated day of the year. And we're only here in this country of ours because of a lot of the efforts of our forebearers and ancestors who went to war in World War I and II and Vietnam and others. And I know in the UKB next week, I think May 5th to the 8th, there's VE Day, which is a sort of an 80th anniversary celebration. There's a long weekend there. And to our friends in America on, I think, May 25th, 26th, around that time, there's a long weekend for Memorial Day weekend, which is similar in terms of respecting all of those who've gone before and fought in a war and battle. So we thought we would loosely tie something in with INXS. Of course, INXS aren't soldiers, but we thought we would do a tie-in for our topic today, but celebrate this time of year, B.
I love it, Hayden. I think I've got a few little things that I can say as well about this.
All right. So before we get to that, though, B, what's it time for?
It's time for the news.
Hi, this is Sarah from Sydney. You're listening to INXS Access All Areas, and now it's time for the news.
Now, B, we might have mentioned last week, I think the Listen Like Thieves sort of Redux version of the song Listen Like Thieves came out last week for some people to listen to on some of the streaming platforms and things. And at the time of recording, we're probably only 2 weeks away from the actual Redux album being released. So there's lots of things going on with that particular sort of release, and lots of articles and publications giving homage to this pending release. I was thinking to myself today, B, it's probably the reissue that I'm looking forward to the most, because we've had so many Kick reissues and we've had some other ones, like, the Swing and things. But this particular one, I just feel like management and everyone behind it's putting so much more into it. And we'd love to see this album chart. I think it's got a really strong chance in Australia, particularly of charting, certain other countries around the world, given the content available on it.
I absolutely agree. I think this is going to be an absolute winner for everybody. I know there's lots of people out there that have already pre-ordered. If you haven't, then...
A little bit of retrospective news, B, that the gang from Rockstar INXS all getting together in November, 20 years after the event. So I don't know if you heard a little bit about that with JD and...
I did. Is JD going? I'm not sure JD's on that list.
I don't know if he's on the list to go. I know a lot of the other sort of cast members who didn't win are all heading there. I think Mig and, Marty Casey and maybe Jordis and a few others there.
And they did say special guests, so who knows?
Never know. Knowing JD, he'd be probably too cool for school to turn up, but no dramas. I can share that he's touring sort of, this next 6 months. So I mentioned a previous gig in Michigan he's doing, but he just announced, I think this week, he's playing at a festival in Chatham, Kent. Now, that's not Chatham, Kent, England. It's Chatham, Kent in Ontario, in the province of Ontario in Canada. And that's at the Honda Festival in Canada at Tecumseh Park on July the 3rd to the 6th.
That sounded so rude when you said that.
I know. I was trying to sort of keep a straight face. But look, so JD's putting some gigs together. I'm going to just check out, see if he's on the set list FM and seeing what tracks he's been playing when he's touring. So worth getting on to that. Yeah. Also, too, a little bit of news. See some footage the other day of Kirk's daughter, April, blaring a new ring. I think she just got engaged, B.
Oh, bless her.
For our gossip girls and who all love the bling and the ring. She was at the Royal Easter Show in Sydney. And one of those, paparazzi saw her there with her hand and her big diamond ring there. And she's sort of engaged to her partner. I think she's on Neighbours here in Australia. And for our UK listeners and things, probably know what Neighbours is. It's a very long time running TV show. She's 37. I didn't realise that she had grown up so fast.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't realise she was that old too. But she's still beautiful though, isn't she? She still looks vibrant, young.
Very striking. Takes after her mother,
Yeah. Oh, I could see a lot of Kirk in there. The good bits.
You didn't hear my joke then, did you?
Thanks. Yeah, I did.
All right. Now, I don't really normally plug eBay, but there is a cool little publication. I've mentioned this before, but there's a great sort of article or a feature piece on John Farris in 1986 in Modern Drummer magazine, which really around that particular time, between that and Musician magazine, INXS's live chops, ironically around this Listen Like Thieves tour, were being really recognised. And there's a great article and front page cover and a deep dive publication there. And you can go on eBay and buy that little old publication because there's some good info in there. I remember reading it at the time. Also, 2B, I know I talk about our first reactions every week. You'd like this one. There's an elegantly wasted first reaction video that just came out. The guy who's actually putting this up on YouTube, he looks like a bank teller, but he's grooving along a little bit like a nerdy bank teller. So I found it.
And where can we find that? Just on YouTube? And then we just type in elegantly wasted or something?
Yeah, first reaction, and it should pop up. Yeah.
Thanks.
Also, too, I don't know if we mentioned last week, but Luke Arnold, somebody we'd love to get on the show, who portrayed Michael in the movie, he has basically done a big sit-down with Rolling Stone. So I haven't sort of read the article yet, but I've seen a few snippets there and obviously talked a lot about the pressure of being able to sort of do justice to sort of Michael's persona. And I think back at the time when the miniseries did come out, he did get rave reviews for the performance because he was relatively unknown. So you weren't bringing sort of the pressures of a prior sort of character coming into play, Michael, and having somebody who had a known movie star sort of career be compared to what Michael was. And sometimes those no-name people, like even Austin Butler, who did Elvis, got good reviews because he wasn't that well known before portraying Elvis,
Yeah, so they don't recognise him as somebody else.
No, that's right. So that particular article's come out in the latest Rolling Stone, which is good.
Mm-hmm, it's good. Mm.
Also, too, over our sort of news journey, B, we've always liked to highlight anything that pops up on YouTube that may relate to sort of an interview that dates back to sort of the past. And I think there's one with Tim and Michael doing some press back in the 90s in America there on 106.7 KROQ FM. And I got a chance to see half the interview a bit earlier, but it's quite good and seeing sort of Michael and Tim back in their promo days. They used to do a lot of promo stuff together. Some of these things, as I said, they're very much not available until someone pops them onto YouTube. So if you do get a chance to watch that, it's worth your investment. All right, bring it home. Now, Kirk did a podcast the other week. Did you know what podcast he was on, B? Did you find out?
I did. And now you're asking me, and you didn't ask me to research it beforehand. So I've already put it onto our socials. It was with an Argentinian lady. It's called Radio 24. Something. Let me find it. It's called A Radio Rock. Okay. But yeah, he let a lot out the bag, didn't he? She sweet talked him.
Well, I'm going to have a watch and listen to that. As I said, we always plug anything to do with INXS, whether it's our podcast or others, check it out. But Kirk looked pretty happy, having a lot of fun with his blonde hair.
Kirk mentioned that there's still the musical's still going to be happening.
Well, yeah, I saw something promoted. I plugged into Google today, and it was one of those articles that sort of disappeared. So I wasn't able to sort of find out sort of exactly where that stands. But
yeah, so that's definitely happening. And there's definitely a documentary happening about INXS too.
Well, that has to happen.
Yeah, so we've got two things. And then he let it out the bag that there will be something for the 50th anniversary too.
Right. Okay. Well, MCG, I'll book that.
Yeah, you can book the next party.
Yeah. No, we'll get the MCG going. And for those that don't know, it's the biggest stadium in Australia. It holds 102,000 people. So INXS Day there in, I don't know, maybe January 2027. And the weather conditions would be great,
Yay.
This week also on Sunday, April 27th, Lee Harding's playing gig down in Mornington B. I'm going to see if I can get some tickets and head down to that. So somebody who is a former winner of Australian Idol and has been doing a lot of INXS retrospective stuff the last 3-4 years. So hopefully I can get to that gig and get him on our show, because it'd be great to sort of have a chat to about what's inspired him to sort of, travel all of Australia playing, INXS music, which is something he's very passionate about. Also, too, just bringing it home, Richard Lumsden did a good deep dive with a publication called danspapers.com. It's done a big interview with them. I think it's via a podcast, I think. Richard's always erudite and honest and frank. Again, such a big part of INXS's career. So, again, if you haven't seen that yet, that's available. Just getting back to that other one with Tim and Michael doing the YouTube one, it's based on a show called Jed the Fish with INXS. So if you are looking for that, Jed the Fish with INXS on 106.7.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, but B, that's all the entire news of the week.
Hey, this is Tim Farris. Big shout out to Hayden and B. Also want to say hello to all the listeners and INXS fans. Thanks for listening. I love you, Hayden and B. You're doing a great job. Keep it up.
Hi, this is Ella from Middelburg, the Netherlands. You're listening to INXS Access All Areas with Hayden and B. And now it's time for the topic of the week.
All right, B. Well, as we said, it's for the after the show. We're doing a topic today, sort of around at the time in Australia where we celebrate Anzac Day. And as we said, it's that time of year where all of our fathers who fought in battle and grandfathers are really paid homage to on what is a fantastic celebratory day. And often in Australia, with Anzac Day, we have an expression called "lest we forget." And you may have seen that in our episode title today. A lot about war, unfortunately, over the journey and over the years, is all about bravery. And it's all about hardship and mateship, as I think you said at the start, before we started recording today. And, one of the things you said to me earlier, B, is that something you loved about Australia when you got here was that sort of fair income, mateship, brotherhood type loyalty. Do you want to just expand on that?
Yeah. It's something that my husband explained to me when I first got here, that it's the mateship is really big in Australia. You just don't let your mates down. It's all about being part of the community and helping your friends. And I love that. That's always been my motto myself. So coming to Australia felt like my type of people. But yeah, I think today is going to be pretty good because, INXS were our heroes, and I think we could celebrate them as our heroes today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. I think one of the things that, is really littered in the Australian psyche. Look, and every country has its DNA. It has its idiosyncrasies that sort of sum up, what makes up a nation. And if you're from America, you could probably speak to those feelings and characteristics better than what I can as a foreigner. And if you're British,
stiff upper lip in England, isn't it?
Probably. Well, you can speak culturally to what that is. If it is that. Having grown up here and spent my life here and whatever there. A band like INXS is in some respects quintessentially Australian because, they're a band of six brothers, who fought, tremendous odds, tyranny of distance, the struggle with prejudice in some respect, cliche, prejudiced opinions from overseas record companies, critics and press, particularly in the UK. They were able to unite as a sort of a band of brothers to sort of go on and conquer the world. And by no way or shape or form are we trying to compare their quest and their success with the bravery of our soldiers. But I know, say, for example, this Friday we're playing, and we play this game of Australian rules football every Anzac Day at the MCG, which I mentioned earlier, is that biggest stadium. My team, Collingwood and Essendon, debuted that game 30 years ago, and it's the 30th anniversary this week. And the very first day they played this particular game, our RSL, which is our Retired Return Services League fundraising group for the soldiers, and then they got together with the footy clubs and decided to help schedule this game with the AFL. And ended up being like 93,000, 94,000 people. And the game ended up in a draw. Now, in Australian rules football, to end up in a draw, it happens about 2 games out of 170 games a year. So it's a very rare 190 games a year. So it's very rare we get draws because of the scoring system.
Yes.
But this particular game has taken off over the years. And, what they often say to the players for going on to play this game is that, look, we're nowhere near in the neighbourhood of being as brave as the soldiers, but be inspired by your freedoms that you have, be inspired by the past, honour the day in many requests with the work habits and the way you go about performing on the day. And I think, as I said, our soldiers from all countries who went globally to fight wars around the world, were very, very brave in the sense that, in those days, there was probably no internet, computers and all those sort of things. So many of those soldiers who went overseas were like 16 and 17 wanting to see the world, It was their only way they were probably going to see the world, by going to war.
Mm.
Nowadays, the freedom of choice to travel and do things without having to be attached to war are omnipresent. So, what we thought we would do today a little bit is, and I know my sort of point of view, I'm going to talk a little bit about the bravery of what INXS did within their own career and their own 4 walls to conquest their world and climb the upper echelons of success. And, I think each of us have got 7 key things that are very individual to what we think about the band that sort of sum up and, have a bit of a tie-in with this sort of time of year where we do celebrate our soldiers and our heroes. Did you want to add anything to that, Bea?
No, I'll take your lead, Hayden.
Right, okay. Well, I thought I would give you the new ball today, and I thought that what I might get you to do is that we can always alternate them, or you've got your 7 there, I think, is that right?
I do, yes.
Right, okay. Well, do you want to do this a bit different day? Do you want to go through your 7 at once, and then, we go through each one and we can chat about them, then I'll go through mine second?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, well, you start off, okay. What are your sort of 7 sort of moments that, you introduce it. You tell me how you've come up with and tied it in.
Okay, and I haven't done this in any order. I've just done this. It's just come to into my head, into my little fluffy head. Okay, Breaking America with Listen Like Thieves in 1985. Very brave. And you talk about INXS being a band of brothers, and that they're the 6 of them. There are actually 7 really. With Chris, Yep. He's their major. What would you call him?
He's probably the major general of the band.
The major general of the band going up. In fact, he went over there first, didn't he? We hear that he went out and did some deals and found out where to go first. And
you're right. He probably was the general of the army, and Michael and Andrew were probably his 2 captains, ICs, and the other 4 boys were the lieutenants,
That's right.
Yeah.
So, I think that was a very important move. Yes, I know Perth and learning their trade there and the pubs and very brave doing all of that. That's number 1. Number 2, Wembley. Not so much brave, but put the Aussie flag up in the air, really. I think Michael wrapped himself in the Aussie flag, didn't he, on stage at the end? We conquered it. We got to Wembley. I mean, Wembley is such a pinnacle, such a flagship, such an iconic place. It's like landing on the moon, really, isn't it? Number 3, the Live Baby Live live premiere. Brave to have spent so much money on something that they didn't have any money left from afterwards. I heard there was not enough.
Oh, yes.
Not enough to pay their champagne bill afterwards, I think, or something. So, bravery that even today we're still getting all this joy from.
Now they're riding high in America. They may seem like an overnight success, but they've been going since 1977.
Can I ask you about image? Kirk, seeing you're looking extremely snazzy today, ultra. Did you when you started out, sort of think about the way you looked and start out with a set thought about your music and the way you were going to be on stage?
At first, I think all I thought about was the music. I was pretty much a dag, I think, and and it's just something that you have to develop over the years. I mean, just learning to play guitar or whatever instrument and playing is not all there is to it. There's presentation, looking good, image, attitude, everything, confidence, and I think that, along with everything else, is something that's developed, over the years.
You've learned as you went.
Yeah.
What about Australia then? I mean, what do you see as the basis of your support and your success in Australia?
I think to this day I look back at what we've done and I think to myself, hang on, it really wasn't fantastic at all, And I think it was just the support from families and friends and just that the people who actually liked us and saw us play. I think
the audiences that came to your gigs.
Sure. I mean, there wasn't any sort of hype. There wasn't any money. We didn't have any money. It was all just going out and playing, and basically we got ourselves to do gigs and found ourselves gigs, and we're really keeping ourselves down to earth.
Another way into the music business is through selling. Each year, Australians buy $140 million worth of music. On each retail dollar, 8 cents goes to the band. The rest to the middlemen along the way. There's another group of people who collect money for music makers, APRA, the Australian Performing Rights Association. If you're a songwriter, APRA will collect royalties for you on your copyright for nothing.
When you think about the music industry, you've got to remember that really the whole industry starts with the song.
Shabu Shaba, the US hustle tour that they did in 1983, they travelled around in little vans, stinky young boys all packed in together. Shabu Shaba was just an epic album that Australia loved, and then they took that on tour as well. Number 5, the Band of Brothers. Yes, there's brothers in there, but those brothers were actually schoolmates as well, and they all looked after each other. One was down, one was up. They just were just wonderful. I loved when we had Nick Egan on, and he said it was like herding sheep. When they were there on set, there was always some boy doing something silly and trying to get them all together. But wow, when they got together, we had this incredible music. Number 6, post-Michael. The resilience of INXS post-Michael, the bravery they had to still keep going and looking for somebody to help them, to lead them through. And we got some great songs. Number 7, my last one, is INXS, still rolling on, fighting. They're still recognised. They're out there. 17 million albums. Amazing. That's my list.
Okay.
Have we stepped on each other?
No. Look, I think there might be a little bit of crossover in a couple of parts, but across the board, what you've got is a little bit sort of different. What I've done, typical me, the opposite to you, I've done mine in chronological order and broken it down. So my theme out of this particular list of 7 is all based on the theme of bravery. You can only be brave in the world that you know, and the world that they knew at the time was back in 1977, 78. A different world to the one we're in now. And sometimes when I think about this, the best thing you can have when you're trying to navigate yourself through the world and be successful is naivety. If you actually knew the chances or the odds of things not actually working out, sometimes a lot of people wouldn't be successful at anything in life because they'd probably sort of talk themselves out of it. And poor old Andrew in the miniseries, he probably was the one who was trying to talk the band out of being successful when he was the creative genius.
Exactly, yeah.
So that was sort of funny in itself. But look, I've titled the first one down here out of bravery and creating a heroism between sort of what they achieved is, I call it the band commitment. He sends that in the mini-series, but it's always in the DNA of their story, and that is that they, according to Kirk, he used to always say, we want to take this as far as we could go. We're going to stop playing covers. We're going to be 6 of us. We'll go anywhere. When John had to go back to live in Perth with the parents, they decided to move to Perth from Sydney, effectively, particularly in WA between the 1977 and 1979. Did so much touring around the outback there because, they were loyal to John and they were loyal to the band and the 6 of them, and, drove across the Nullarbor and got there, and it was a very difficult sort of set of circumstances, for guys who had no guarantees at all. They had no plan B, really. Maybe Andrew, as we said, could have been an accountant and things like that. And from that sort of point of view, they really had to have a huge self-belief almost before they'd recorded an official song. And that's just, if you just pause about that moment, they didn't have Need You Tonight in the kitty bag. They didn't have Kick. They just had a bunch of demos. And they had a bunch of live touring, and They had some covers they played, and they had no big record deal yet, but they went to Perth as a band commitment to stick together and take it as far as commitment comes first before success. And I think that bravery to commit to something without known results. I mean, these days, a lot of young people don't want to do it because they want to know the result if they're going to try. Oh, why do I go to uni? Am I going to pass? I won't go if I'm not going to pass, you know? Well, in music, their chances of succeeding were probably 1 in 1,000, given the competition of bands and other artists. So I think the band commitment was my first thing. Secondly, what I put down here, musical trendsetters versus following the trend. In Australia at that particular time, you know, as they sort of emerged and got a recording deal and whatever there, the Aussie pub circuit was full of very successful bands who'd done very well. They'd probably had 10-year careers. They'd probably climbed the Australian charts, played all the major Australian venues, maybe played some bigger venues here, but basically petered out because they didn't climb the international sort of landscape, and, you know, they have families, and suddenly they're like, okay, we've achieved what we've achieved. INXS probably, you know, had that pub DNA, but I think as Chris Murphy said, they had something a little bit more sophisticated, something a bit more international, and it probably came from Michael's sort of, you know, global sort of superstar type presence and lyric writing and Andrew's funky sort of rhythms, that they had something a little bit different. From a musical point of view, they sort of didn't tread a formula of just pub rock, or even when it came to that new wave stuff. When we look at the album cover of The Swing, is very new wave, you know, with the haircuts and everything there, and even a couple of the film clips there. But they were able to sort of jump out of that sort of batch of bands like the Thompson Twins and Nick Kershaw and, you know, the Models and Howard Jones, and around that sort of era where a lot of new wave bands got stuck, and they were able to, you know, with Listen Like Thieves, show their rock chops, and then that led into Kick, and the whole sort of distinction was there, that they were able to be more than just what they were perceived to be. So I felt from a musical trend-setting point of view, they set the trend rather than followed.
Totally agree. I mean, they stood out, didn't they? I mean, and they've always felt like that they needed to be different to everybody else.
Yeah. And I think, as I said again, they were, you know, they grew up in a place like Australia where you heard, you know, Led Zeppelin on the radio with Aretha Franklin, and their influence was so wide and vast. Every album, particularly in the early days and thereafter, had such a spectrum of sound. So they're always, you know, looking to have a mosaic of sounds and rhythms and styles, and they weren't sort of, you know, lumped into that genre type of thing where they were just heavy rock, or they were just guitar band or a keyboard band. They had some of their parts that meant they were more than just what they were probably perceived initially to be.
And they had a musical genius.
Well, there you go. Number 3, I put down videos, and I put down sort of cutting edge. You know, in Australia, we through the shows like Countdown and things, had videos 7 to 8 years before MTV. So Australia was at the forefront. If you look back at AC/DC as an example, they were doing videos in 1975, 76 in Australia as a way of promoting themselves both domestically but also overseas. I mean, we're such a big country. Video type sort of shots and film clips were such a big thing for bands in Australia to get a national presence without having to travel interstate. But it was such a big thing for bands like AC/DC, Men at Work, you know, Split Enz, all these bands in Australia that did so successfully here because they were able to cut videos. And bands like ABBA and Blondie had their first #1 hits in Australia because they came out to Australia, saw this concept, and started doing videos and appearing on Countdown as well. So if you think back to INXS's early days, working with people like Scott Hicks, you know, I think on Don't Change and, you know, Spy of Love in those early days, working, you know, with Richard Lowenstein, of course, you know, Alex Proyas, a lot of these cutting-edge video directors who have now gone on, you know, to Hollywood fame, they were quite ahead of the curve in picking up, you know, video as a concept, but then also various technology and trends. And, you know, we've talked at infinitum about the What You Need film clip and Need Your Night clip and just the innovations of what Richard did. They were, as I said, again, brave in allowing that medium to exist, but not to the point where it overshadowed the music. I think Duran Duran, historically, are more overshadowed by the imagery of girls on film and some of those film clips than they are for the source of the songs. I think INXS songs and the video stand up equally. How do you feel about that, being a Brummie?
Oh no, you're touching a little nerve there, Hayden.
Yeah.
Girls on Film is a very iconic song and video, so I think you're wrong.
Duran Duran joke about even a film clip like Rio, you know.
Oh, well, that was very Roxy music-like, wasn't it?
But a lot of those film clips were quite cheaply made, Hungry Like the Wolf, but, you know, they probably overshadowed the imagery of that era rather than song. But I think INXS, you know, with songs like Need You Tonight, they added to the song, you know, they added to, you know...
a lot more creative flair to it than having a couple of girls in mud.
That's right. So, look, I think the third thing they're very brave with is using video technology at a time before it was popular.
Yes.
and then building on it once it was popular as well. All right, number 4 I've got down here. I've got releasing Need You Tonight / Mediate as the first song off Kick. That song, as I said, it's very hard to distinguish it and listen to it freshly, but as we've said a lot of the time, it's quite an odd song in its structure, in its melody, in its simplicity in some respects, in its production techniques with Michael's vocal, and then with the rap version of Mediate type sort of song there as well attached to it. A lot of the time when it was released, it had Need You Tonight / Mediate on it as a duo when it went on to MTV. So it's quite a brave choice to release that, particularly when the record company didn't like it, wanted to re-record the album. I tie that in with that sort of Kick stuff. That when they brought that song and some of the other tracks to, Doug Morris, he said, "I'll pay you $1 million to re-record." And they said, stuff you don't know what you're talking about. I think that was an example of sheer bravery where they were right at the zeitgeist about to go global, and they stuck to their digs and they released that song as the hit. Yeah. And then they released, obviously, the album there to follow. So quite a pivotal moment for my number 4 there, B.
And another creative move.
Correct. All right, number 5. Look, this escaped me a little. The band had to work really hard for that number 1 hit to get Kick on the radio playlists and get it going because their own label didn't support it.
Yeah.
So I think that...
they believed in themselves.
Yeah, and by the end of the tour, they'd played for 18 months. John's knee was buggered. And all the success that followed, like the MTV Awards, number 1 albums, number 1 songs, top 10 hits, all the acclaim that followed, well, that's a byproduct of bravery.
Yeah.
So I think that starting off in the college circuits and being humble enough to go and say, all right, we should be in arenas, but go, no, we'll play 500 people in a college. We're okay to do that, and we'll build it up. By the end of the tour, they're playing 50,000 seat venues, and Guns N' Roses were supporting them.
Michael Hutchins from INXS. Welcome back to Good Rocking today.
Thank you.
The last time you were here, it was the Commodore in Vancouver, and now it's the Coliseum. I mean, there's a drastic difference in not only audience size, but just in terms of success. How is success sitting with you?
It's very well. Yeah, everything's going great. INXS is a funny animal. The more we just enjoy ourselves and almost indulge ourselves in a positive way, the more success we've had. So
pros and cons.
Yeah, we're very happy at the moment.
You surprised?
Well, I didn't think about it, so I'm not surprised either way. We just do what feels right and natural and what comes to us, And it's boringly simple, sorry.
But still, if you do something boringly simple and end up on top, what about pros and cons of it? Are you finding other problems to go along with the joy of being successful, as successful as you are?
I think you inherit a lot of responsibility for all kinds of things you never expected you would. They range from the sublime to the ridiculous, and you just got to deal with those and figure out your priorities,
What about the ridiculous? What have you had to do that you haven't particularly enjoyed?
Oh, I don't know. Just the funniest things that somehow involve playing music as well. Just to not be able to go to certain places at certain times and do certain things.
Your privacy really affected.
Yeah, there's privacy and things like that, which isn't too bad, I think. Really, I'm not.
All right, number 6 I've got down here. Bursting the bubble. You mentioned Wembley earlier there, and Wembley was probably 11 years in the making in the terms of a recording and a video career. To go do the Welcome to Wherever You Are and then the Full Moon album and then do clubs and pubs and uni circuit tours in Australia and not go on tour and go back to sort of coming up with something very artistic, which those 2 albums were, I think was a brave decision. A lot of people say it was a little bit stupid commercially. It wasn't a commercially smart decision. They probably in hindsight could have not beaten the grunge movement, but they could have probably, traversed the grunge movement maybe like Bon Jovi did and a couple of others, if they were prepared enough to, maybe tour a little bit more around 92, 93, in America on some of the bigger venues. But I still think it was a artistic choice, and I think the music is the legacy of that choice. So I think they were brave in that sense. I'd rather have Welcome and Full Moon in my repertoire than just a couple of number 5 hits and, them just playing it safe with X Part 2. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think you're right there. But they needed to rest, though, didn't they? They did need to, not do those big stadiums. They wanted to, be nearer to their fans.
Well, what takes it out of you? People don't realise. I think the Canadian bands do, but we've said this a lot. Like, it's all right for Bono and the gang in Ireland to fly home and, do a gig and then fly home in their private plane and be in bed at 12 at night, in your own bed when you're on tour. A lot of these bands, would play a Friday gig, they'd be home Saturday, Sunday for the weekend and go out and be at another state show in Europe on Tuesday. Unfortunately, Australia's not like that. If you go to America or Europe or wherever, you leave home for 6 months at a time, 12 months at a time, 18 months at a time, and on the back of, Shabu Shabar, and then on the back of the Swing Tour, and on the back of Listen Like Thieves, and then on the back of Kick, and then on the back of X. They had all of these massive tours around the globe, and they had families and they had commitments, and they wanted to regenerate and to be creative and artistic. You need to have the energy and the inspiration to be so. And I reckon room service in every hotel room would be hard to summon up the inspiration all the time to come up with great material.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And the last one, I think in line with something you mentioned earlier in yours, was I put down here to continue post-Michael. Was a very brave move. It was one that was probably ridiculed at the time, and the one that probably the band never got over because Michael was such an artistic performer, such a presence. But they had a genuine level of success since Michael, passed. They've sold, just as many records since he's passed than they did when he was around. And that's a combination of time, but it's a combination of the legacy and a lot of the hard work they did between, particularly say probably between 2004 to 2010. And they had different singers, and we know the history and we've spoken about it. But, if we look back in history, some of the other bands who have gone on with new singers and had, maybe varying levels of success, I thought I'd share some of these. We've got Linkin Park, who've just reformed with, I think, a female singer. Queen have had a couple of singers since Freddie went. Alice in Chains. We all know the New Order story post Joy Division. Stone Temple Pilots, The Grateful Dead, The Doors. The Doors had the guy Ian Astbury from the Cult sing with them in 2002.
Yeah. Lynyrd
Skynyrd, Thin Lizzy. There's been a lot of bands that have kicked on. And look, most of them haven't had the success they had with the original singers, but they have forged a long-term touring ability and sold lots of their back catalogue and had sort of, fan respect for doing so. And I think, again, when Michael died, a lot of the band members, were only, when you think back to their age levels, they were only 35, 36, 37. They still had a lot to give. And I think we're lucky to have Switch. We're lucky to have, the original Sin re-recorded album. We're lucky to have some of the gigs we went to see. And when they did call it a day from touring, I think they gave it a fair shake with what they had to work with.
Yeah, very brave.
Yeah. And look, AC/DC is an interesting one. A lot of people go, well, AC/DC are really successful. But they lost their band member back in the pre-MTV days when no one even knew what the new singer looked like, let alone what the old singer looked like. They both sounded similar. And then when poor old Brian went down about 7 or 8 years ago, they got Axel in to sing. And then since then, with AC/DC, Malcolm's passed away. And they've got his nephew, I think, who's playing in the band. The only original member in the band is Angus. And they're still touring around doing what they do, but they're not really quintessentially the real AC/DC. Look, they go out there and people enjoy it and they're bringing joy to the world. Well, fair play to them. And I think INXS did that, despite the knockers at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think since they paused and called it a day and did the mini-series and built a legacy, I think a little bit of the brand damage that people sense they had has sort of been restored. And I think we often, really associate INXS with Michael and not everything since. But I still think there's some reputable work they did post-Michael.
Yeah, and there's stuff there that's still in the archives that needs to come out of Michael and maybe JD and John Stevens that we haven't seen before that might come out in this new doco.
That's right. That's right. And look, just tying a few other little themes in, sometimes, bands get lambasted sort of with the title. They're a political band like The Clash and, U2 and things like that. As we've often said, INXS are a little bit more subtle in their messaging. But we think of themes like Dancing on the Jetty, Watch the World Argue, Original Sin, Mediate, The Stairs, Hear That Sound, Don't Lose Your Head, and even Way of the World, from Michael. I think the band were always, quite thoughtful beyond themselves. And, they weren't just a sort of a girls band or whatever. They were quite thoughtful about, the messaging they have in the world. And I know growing up in the 80s, particularly in Australia, where we had a real threat of, and you would have had this in Europe, a real threat of nuclear war. It was something that was very much around 1983 to 87, like a lot of the time, like the Russians and Americans were fighting. And there was a lot of pushback, at that particular time, a lot of threats about wars. And, INXS played a lot of anti-bombing sort of, type gigs, with Midnight Oil, and were quite thoughtful, in their presence, in terms of their messaging they could put out. They've always been to be commended for that. They weren't as obvious as other bands, but, they were just as thoughtful in many cases.
And meaningful.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, as we celebrate Anzac Day, VE, Remembrance Day next week, and then Memorial Day next month, as I said, they're the real heroes there. And as I said, I think our little band, INXS, they're our heroes in their own way and should be commended for their own level of bravery within their own industry. So, B, like always, thank you for letting me. All right, B, well, that's a wrap.
Excellent. Really enjoyed that. That was awesome. And to all our soldiers that are still serving as well today in this terrible world at the moment, there's so much going on. We thank you all.
And we should in Australia adopt what the Americans say. Thank you for your service.
Yes, thank you for your service.
And Larry David, next time you're around, okay, in one of the episodes, say thank you for their service. You won't know what that means, but some of our Curb Your Enthusiasm listeners will know what it means.
Okay.
Now, B, we've got a party coming up. I said at the start of the show, you might be able to do a little reveal as to what our chocolate bar is this week, because I think it's one of the cutest things I've ever heard. So can we do a bit of a drum roll and a reveal of what the chocolate bar of the party is this year in everyone's little doggy bags, show bag?
Are you sure? Are you sure you want to let this at the bag?
I do.
Oh, okay. You're a very excited little boy, aren't you? Okay. It is called the Kit Kat.
Not a Kit Kat, a Kit Kat after the Kit Gold. Okay. Fantastic. Okay. Gone from, what was the one last time again, B?
A Taste It bar.
Right, okay. Yeah. Appropriate. But
And that is, all right. Well, what are we going to do next year, Hayden? That's going to be your port now.
Am I sure when I see this chocolate bar, there's a picture of the Kick album cover on it, and then it's sort of got a cat next to it. Is that right? Yeah.
No.
No, something like that. But look, we'll have to come up with something sort of next time. Maybe,
And you read the drinks, you read the cocktails.
I have. They're very funny. We will hold those back. We'll hold those back for the night off. But all right. All right. Well, B, I thought we'd go out with a tribute song today.
Don't forget the tickets.
Oh, yeah, sorry, the raffle tickets. Sorry. Fire away. Tell us about those again.
And still, you can go to our website and get your tickets to win the original vintage kit. Not kick. You've got kick on my head now. Listen Like Thieves vintage album, which we've had signed by Tim and Kirk kindly. Thank you, guys. And we are going to give that out to somebody if you win. In order to win, you go to our website and it will be on the homepage there. You can click on the little thing, and that's just $20 a ticket. So why not buy 5?
And if you don't want to be a patron, to get some raffle tickets, be in it to win it. We can't wait to draw that. And I've already seen the signatures. I want it, but I can't have it.
And you know what? I've got a few nice little things that I'm going to put with it as well.
Okay. Yeah. Great. All right, B, I thought we'd go with a bit of a song today that is in line with our theme of the day. And it's a little bit about, the world and, war and mateship and brotherhood and everything there. And I thought we'd go back to the album The Swing with the 4th single off The Swing called Dancing on the Jetty. I'm sure we've got a version out there within our purview that we can put online and not get shut down. But there is a very much a lyrical sensibility with the theme of this song. So I thought it was a perfect one to come out with today. Dancing on the Jetty.
Love it.
That's
Great.
A goodbye
song.
from me.
And it's a goodbye from B. Goodbye, everybody. Well done, Hayden.
Thank you, B.
Okay, our next song deals with why we're here tonight. This one's about not overlooking the problems in the world and making them straight again. It's why we came all the way from down under up to here.
It's All Areas, episode 218 for the podcast that all aims to dive deep into all things great about our favourite band, INXS, doing it with my compadre B and a bunch of listeners and patrons around the world. B, this is our first time ever. I'm doing an outside broadcast today, live from the stadium venue of my local Suns football team.
I feel like I'm talking to just the beard. It's very off-putting, but that's okay. I think we've got this.
Well, look, listeners, not that anyone cares, but in the interest of school holidays, one decided not to have a shave for a couple of weeks. And yeah, you're right, B. I'm getting a little bit grey around the chin.
Oh, well, we're getting to that age now.
That's all right. I might do a Kirk and get some peroxide in there.
Yeah, why not? Just do it.
We're getting pretty excited because our party's coming up in a couple of weeks' time and lots of things are happening.